Well, the June 12th protest in 2019 back then was known as the 612 incident, and that refers to the pivotal moment when intense confrontation erupted between protesters and the police outside the government headquarters in Admiralty. Well, the protesters wanted to stall the extradition bill that would allow the transfer of fugitives to mainland China and Macau. Well, the bill was eventually postponed indefinitely. Protests continued to break out and escalate as days progressed, with protesters storming the Legislative Council on July 1st. For months, several roads were shut down as protesters spilled onto the streets. Businesses in those areas also came to a standstill.
喺19年之後咧，個營業額又跌咗40%-50%之間，而嗰陣時咧成忽失驚無神啊，要拉閘啊！ 因為咧喺灣仔咧啲人個個喺度搞震啊嘛嗰條軒利詩道咧最緊要嘅呢條街咧開始就冇乜人行啦，即係夜晚分分鐘要早啲收工。
因為我哋呢條街咧其實都當時咧都有封路嘅情況，所以咧就有影響，但係個氣氛係緊張少少咯，即係可能我唔驚，但係總有人好擔心，就出少咗嚟，就嗰度已經係流失咗起碼2至3成。
And for more, we are joined by National University of Singapore's senior fellow, Dr. Lim Tai Wei. We have our Beijing correspondent, Olivia Siong, as well as our Hong Kong correspondent, Deborah Wong. Well, thank you all for joining us this evening. First to you, Olivia. I remembered you were in Beijing when this was all unfolding and we were all glued to our television sets, you know, watching what's happening. What was the reaction on the mainland back then?
I'll tell you, there were varied responses from mainland Chinese with regard to what was happening. Some quarters did feel that the central government was perhaps too lenient with Hong Kong, allowing it too much autonomy, which resulted in some feeling that Hong Kong was no longer a part of China. Now, while online, some Chinese social media platforms, we saw discussion being restricted, but there was some post from Chinese netizens saying that they supported Beijing stepping in to take action to restore order and stability in Hong Kong. The question then was how Beijing would respond to these ongoing protests and demonstrations. This also, as observers had viewed that the central government would have to tread carefully given the promise that Hong Kong would see no changes under the one country, two systems framework for 50 years. And that includes a high degree of autonomy as well as freedoms not seen here on mainland cities, freedoms that some in Hong Kong felt were being eroded. So signs of how Beijing was trying to navigate this situation could be seen in various ways. One of them was in a report that a major general from the Chinese People's Liberation Army, he criticized Hong Kong, calling it an ungrateful wolf, but added that the Chinese military was not eager to interfere in this situation. Another standout moment from the coverage then was, I remember attending news conferences. We saw the mainland's top Hong Kong affairs office called a news conference to address the situation after 8 weeks of demonstrations had taken place in the city. And this was significant because it was the first time that the Hong Kong affairs office was holding a news conference since 1997. And that was when we saw Britain return Hong Kong to China. Subsequently, many more of such media conferences followed and we attended, but several key points stood out. We always saw the Chinese officials condemn the violent actions of protesters, calling them radicals. Also, they threw their weight and supported the then Hong Kong administration under Chief Executive Carrie Lam amid calls from some quarters for her to step down, saying that stability and order need to be restored. Also, we saw officials underscore China's commitment to the one country, two systems framework, but adding and emphasizing that two systems had to be made on the basis of there being one country. Another strong narrative that we saw was Chinese officials hitting out at what it saw was foreign interference. Have a listen.
他们心甘情愿充当外部势力和反中乱港势力的马前卒，不惜做出暴力违法的恶行， 目的就在于搞乱香港，瘫痪特区政府，进而夺取特区的管制权，从而把香港变成一个独立或半独立的政治实体，假高度自治、港人治港之名，行完全自治，对抗中央之实，最终使一国两制名存实亡。
Olivia, what about in the long term, though? I mean, has Beijing's approach to governing Hong Kong changed?
Well, Telly, in the last 5 years, observers have said that Beijing has moved to make Hong Kong more aligned with the mainland. If you recall, in 2020, we saw China's top legislative body, the National People's Congress, approve the Hong Kong National Security Law, effectively bypassing the Hong Kong legislature. We also saw the passing of electoral reforms so as to allow, as what Beijing would call it, to only allow patriots to govern Hong Kong. But the mainland has also increasingly talked about economic engagement with Hong Kong, particularly with the Greater Bay Area Development Plan. And that's a plan to make the area a technological powerhouse, including seeing that development from Hong Kong. And after the protests in 2022, we saw Chinese President Xi Jinping make a visit to Hong Kong, in which he said that, and that was to mark the 25th anniversary of the Hong Kong handover, in which he did say that the city has risen from the ashes. But he also said that, it was important to address concerns by Hong Kong youth, including over housing, praising, also talking about, steps that would be taken moving forward. And Dr. Lim, this is where I would like to bring you in and get your opinion. You have been watching things. We saw Beijing take unprecedented action to, in the aftermath of these Hong Kong protests. Some would say this would be unthinkable under previous Chinese leaders like Hu Jintao and Jiang Zemin. 5 years on, how would you assess the outcome of these steps that China has taken, as some have said that the Hong Kong today is not the same as before? What are your thoughts?
Well, with the enactment of the national security law, there's certainly a lot of changes in the political front. People are more cautious about their public sort of narratives. And also the political system is much more aligned with mainland China. There's also some convergence as well. On the economic front, there's a lot of roles that mainland China wants Hong Kong to play. For example, it wants Hong Kong to be the #1 offshore renminbi trading center. Also, it is integrating Hong Kong fast into the Greater Bay Area regionalism, in which it envisions Guangzhou to be a city that is a manufacturing hub within the Greater Bay Area project, very much like the Detroit of the US, and also Shenzhen to be the Silicon Valley of China, and Hong Kong to be a banking center in that sense. And recently, in the last few months, there's also a concerted effort by the Hong Kong government to attract more mainland tourists to Hong Kong. They have large numbers of mainland tourists who are visiting Hong Kong for shopping due to its tax-free status, and also the brands that are available in Hong Kong. So we are seeing sort of Hong Kong being integrated into Greater Bay Area region, and also becoming a banking center and a tourist hub for Hong Kong. So much so that Hong Kong is demothballing its Boeing planes in the Australian desert, reactivating them for the Cathay Pacific flights again. So these are likely to be, to carry on henceforth, and it remains to be seen whether Hong Kong, under the government, can really shape these roles against regional competitors, competitors like duty-free shopping in Hainan Island, and also the Shanghai that's developing its own tourism hub status as well. So I think we are quite likely to see Hong Kong trying to remain competitive in the niches that it continues to focus on, like tourism and financial industry.
All right, Deborah, let's bring you in now. Now, you've lived in Hong Kong these few years. How would you say that, these changes have impacted the lives of those in the city that you have spoken to or across your interviews that you've done?
Well, Telly, socially, families are also quite divided because I remember some local friends telling me that they may have different political allegiances, leanings with their relatives or their colleagues or even their partners, and then they have fallen out over it. So the relationship has never been the same since. And that really is a microcosm of Hong Kong society today. It is still quite a politically divided society. Those people who have supported the protesters back then, many of them have already left. Most of the people who have chosen to remain, they believe that the national security law, it brings order and stability to Hong Kong. And, it's interesting also because there are no protests anymore compared to 5 years ago. And we see that play out, especially on key dates, such as the Tiananmen Vigil, which happens on the June 4th date, as well as July 1st, the handover anniversary of Hong Kong from China. These two dates traditionally see mass gatherings happen previously, but it's not a common sight these days. In fact, there's heavy security presence at Victoria Park, the site of the protests, and it's also we also see heavy security presence along footbridges. There are also national security posters all around Hong Kong to remind people to be respectful. And overall, people are not so willing to talk about politics so frankly anymore, like what Dr. Lim said earlier. And as reporters, we have to do several rounds of convincing. We have to sometimes also offer them anonymity in order for them to feel comfortable enough to speak frankly with us. And most recently, we also saw 3 overseas judges in Hong Kong quit the top bench. 2 of them at least cite political reasons, and authorities say that that's a very regrettable decision, but they do maintain that Hong Kong upholds the rule of law and that politics is no place in law. Now, I did speak to ex-co convener Mrs. Regina Ip earlier, and she says that there is no climate of fear in Hong Kong. In fact, she says that it is Western media who frame bad actors as freedom fighters. Here's more.
The red lines will come out from the court judgments, You only find out the red lines after a law has been applied and tested in court. Also look at the numbers. In the past 4 years, ever since this law has been enacted, how many people have been arrested? 297. And how many have been convicted or pleaded guilty? 120. So the national security law is really irrelevant to most people, unless you have an intent to endanger national security.
Dr. Lim, I am curious to find out, aside from the impact of the new security laws, how has the healing process for Hong Kong been socially as well as economically?
Well, since the enactment of the national security law and greater convergence with mainland China, politically as well as economically, and perhaps also in terms of legal aspects. I think Hong Kongers who have discomfort or who do not really want to fit in to the new Hong Kong, some of them have left overseas. It appears that they have set up their own networks overseas sort of old Hong Kongers, and they have been communicating amongst themselves as a diasporic network. Those who have opted to stay in Hong Kong, they are adapting to the new realities, which is greater convergence economically with China. Many of them, for example, are exploring property buying in China, particularly in Guangdong province, Shenzhen and Guangzhou city. Others go shopping over there. So there's greater sort of people-to-people convergence as well. And there are also exchanges that are taking place between students and even military or security personnel between China as well as the special administrative region of Hong Kong. So this is to bring about more social integration as a part of the plan for greater integration into the Greater Bay Area regionalism. Recently, there have also been newspaper articles in the international media about new migrants coming to Hong Kong from China. These new migrants are also adding to the integration process as they set up their new lives in Hong Kong. So we are sort of seeing a social integration at work here with an organic process of those who want to have a different system, migrating overseas, particularly to the West, and also the local Hong Kongers who are adapting to the new local systems, and new migrants coming in from across from mainland into Hong Kong. These three factors at work will probably push and sort of strengthen the social cultural integration process that goes on in Hong Kong as well.
So I'd also like to add that following the riots, more than 10,200 were arrested and some went to jail. And 5 years on, those finished serving their jail terms are struggling to reintegrate into the community, even as the government pledges support. And one former inmate shares his experience with CNA's Jojo Chan.
I went to a protest. I received a call from the police department and they told me to take another oral deposition. So in that day, I know I will be officially prosecuted and bring me to the court. I feel like fear, of course. In the prison, there's were two things I really worry about that. The first one is whether can I continue my study to finish my bachelor degree. And the other thing is what's happened or can I find a job after I graduate.
因為咧呢一條毛巾買翻嚟咧就係有咁長啦，咁然後咧根據懲教嘅要求咧，佢就只能夠係半條咁樣入咯。咁所以買翻嚟咧就仲要將佢人手剪開一半先用得。而嗰啲探訪物品咧喺坊間咧其實係有部分都相當難買嘅。咁除咗係有一啲牌子比較少見之外咧，嗰個物品嘅規格咧，亦都有指定嘅，要符合懲教署嘅保安嘅要求。係啊。我諗過去半年咧就係平安包嗰個使用嘅高峰期啦，多嘅時候咧就平均一個月有120人次到啦。候鳥由成立到而家咧，我哋跟進過嘅個案咧就係超過600人嘅。咁去到目前為止咧，大概咧有70%咧係服刑中嘅。我哋接觸嘅個案咧，大部分都係暴動案嘅。咁當然亦有其他，譬如話係國安法啊、煽動罪啊。咁去到而家咧，法律諮詢啊，或者係一啲在囚經驗分享嘅需求咧，慢慢降低咗。但係咧喺物資方面咧，仍然係有好大嘅需求嘅。
如果一個人佢係已經係受到法律制裁， 我哋係絕對應該盡量幫佢，再去成為對社會貢獻嘅一份子。任何人，剛才我講啦，只需要佢係支持一國兩制，符合基本法同埋遵守香港法律，都係我哋香港建設嘅力量。政府會幫你，我諗社會大眾都會幫啊！呢個大家都係有一個共識嘅。
I can share some of my experience, like after finishing all the interview, all the assessment, but turned down by a criminal record. We always receive a second trial from different people.
When they serve the term, they need to go back to the community so they can start from where they fell. For example, if they are a student, then resumption of study should be a primary objective. So we will help them to get back to the school. It needs more persuasion to get those stakeholders, including the school authorities, the employers, the licensing authority, to accept them without substantial risk. When the community is by and large divided, we try to persuade them that it is in the interest of the community to take these people back so that they can back on track. They are not those criminal-minded persons, and they are really want to contribute to the community.
In the short term, like I want to involve more in the advocacy or some voluntary job in the Project Change and other similar organizations. The government can consider to hire someone like me in a case-by-case basis. Because most of us who participated in the 2019 protests, we are not intended to causing damage in the society. Instead, we wish we can build the betterment of Hong Kong.
So, Deborah, the second trial that Kenny mentioned is something that most ex-convicts seem to experience. Just very quickly tell us, how much harder is it in Hong Kong for this group of young protesters?
Well, I'll tell you, overall, there's a greater emphasis on national security right now. And so employers are also more concerned. They don't want to be implicated, and hence the background checks are definitely a lot more stringent. Now, for example, authorities are now proposing barring social workers who have been convicted of certain crimes, including endangering national security, from rejoining the industry. They're also appointing more government-affiliated people to the board. And for context, a number of social workers took part in the 2019 protests. Now, you compound this with the stigma of being an ex-convict, so the situation can really be a more difficult one. Back to you.
Well, thanks so very much, Hong Kong correspondent Deborah Wong there, as well as our Beijing correspondent Olivia Siong, and not forgetting Dr. Lim Tai Wei. Thanks so very much for your time and thoughts.